It is terrifying. I think that's the thing that we get scared of as chefs, because we're going less is more, and then you go, is it? Can I just put 3 things on a plate and it work? Well, you have to have the balls to kind of to do that. Yeah, confidence.
What's your thoughts on why it's important to care about the visuals?
If you're going to go to all the effort to prepare something, put time and effort into that organisation, the mise en place of that, and then you're going to be careless with the finished product, you're not sticking true to the ethos of what you've done all the way through. You've got a duty to kind of care for it, that ingredient. You know, why wouldn't you take that extra time and effort to make sure everything is aesthetically pleasing? No one ever teaches you about plating, really. You just pick it up as you go along, and then I think it's a real cathartic process, because then you learn your own style of plating. If you're charging people good money, you've got to give them the full experience, and that visual of the food it is super, super important. People do visually want to look at a plate of food and go, wow.
Welcome to the Food Envy podcast, where we're exploring the visual side of food. Today I've come over to Winterbourne in, where are we?
Newbury. Berkshire, yeah.
With Henry from the Damson. Thank you for having me today.
Our pleasure, thank you.
Really excited to have a chat with you about your food, the visual side of your food, and then also we're going to do some plating demos later, which is really exciting. But I thought maybe we could just start with a little history of you, your restaurant.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a chef for, I'm not old, but I've been a chef for a long time. 20 years maybe, been in kitchens. I've worked everywhere around this area, from pubs right up to Michelin star restaurants. Always wanted to kind of do my own thing, and after years and years of working for other people, kind of took the plunge. I had a restaurant in Newbury called Henry and Joe's for 5 years, and that was amazing. Amazing experience to kind of learn how to open and run a restaurant from the ground up. And when that closed, the opportunity to kind of take the USPs that we had there and really build on them, and take them to the next level, led to Damson, really. So yeah, that was about 2.5 years ago. It was 18 months of hard slog to get this building open, and then we've been here since, plugging away, doing what we do. So yeah.
And tell me about Damson.
People ask me all the time, like, what style of food is it? And I'm really bad at answering this question, because essentially it's seasonal ingredients, which is what everyone says, but it is because it's what's best right now. It's what's most affordable to us and to the customer. It's minor manipulation of those ingredients, but what is done to the ingredients is important and is thought through. It's served in kind of a humble way. We want to entice people to come back here for everything, not just the food, but the service, the environment, the atmosphere. So it's modern British food, I'd say, but yeah, it's quality ingredients, local ingredients, and really careful preparation of those ingredients.
When we were chatting off camera slightly earlier, and you were telling me about the other restaurant, which you said was more rustic, and this is more, maybe not fine dining, or I'm not sure how you would describe it, but what would you say is the difference visually on the plate, potentially, between what you did before and what you do now?
I think refinement. I think that the idea, and we'll probably talk about this more later, but less is more. I think there's an idea, especially when I first started, is like, you want to give value and you want to give a presentation that wows people. So you kind of over-egg it a little bit. Okay. You put too many things on the plate, and it's all a bit kind of mismatch, and it's here and there. It might taste great and might still look great, but I think the idea of Damson is, after kind of looking at other styles from other chefs and stuff, is really kind of finding our USP here, and it is kind of less is more, and really refinement on the plate, and how we plate it is simple but yet kind of decadent and just well thought. Nothing kind of careless. I don't want to throw something on a plate. I want to kind of take my time and think about why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay. And where do you get your inspiration for that? Are you a drawer? Are you kind of a freestyler? Are you, because you've clearly been doing this for 20 years, you kind of have an idea of what your style is? How do you start your process, would you say?
I would love to draw more. I think my 3-year-old son's a better drawer than I am. It's just, I think there's an idea of, if I do a drawing, I want it to look better than it does. You know, you'd sketch down a rough idea of how you might want to plate things. But visually, it's not quite as good as actually seeing it on the plate. I think seeing it on the plate, and also the idea of, you have an idea for something, that's going to evolve. That sketch, I think personally, more often than not, that you do is not going to be the final product, because you're going to tweak something there. Also, you can't see colour on a drawing unless you're going to, go to the extent of using coloured pencils. And like I said, I can't draw, so it's a rough sketch, and then you kind of base it off of that. But I like the idea as well of kind of thinking on your feet, being spontaneous, and the setup at Damson allows us to do that. We don't have to conform to a lot of things. We can chop and change it. And also, I something that maybe other chefs don't do, I don't know, but I might ask the customer what they think. You know, at the end of the day, that's our feedback, our best source of feedback. If something doesn't look visually as good as it could do, or maybe it's, you know, they have suggestions or whatever, I'd like to hear that. I think, why not? You know, at the end of the day, they're there, they're going to see it firsthand. They're going to see it from a different point of view. I could do up a dish and say it's great. Is it? You know, does it look visually as good as it could be? I don't know. I'm going to be biased, I think. So
I think that's a very interesting point, because I have heard that before, as in asking for diner feedback.
Yeah.
Because it is an evolution, isn't it? Really. And let's face it, a diner's first impression is with their eye.
Yep.
So if you're missing that first impression,
yeah,
that is a problem. And you as a chef might be super pleased with it from your point of view, but at the end of the day, you're not the one that's going to be consuming it. It's the diner who's probably come, hopefully from quite far, because you know, they come to visit you guys. So their impression is very, very important. So would you say, so you mentioned about, you know, if you draw it, it would evolve. So I assume, does the plating evolve even when you're not drawing it? So you let's say you've created this dish, it goes on the menu on the Wednesday when you're open.
Yeah.
Might it change by the Sunday?
Yep.
You know, through that constant sort of feedback process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
I think also our feedback process as well, because you know, we're a team here. I've got chefs behind me who are more than capable. So it's a process of saying I do something up, and I'm also my own worst critic. I think a lot of chefs are really, because we are putting ourselves on a plate, and it is a challenge. So I want feedback from everyone. You know, I want to see what everyone else thinks, and then you can kind of form a decision based off of that. If it's sending it out, getting the feedback, tweaking a little thing here and there, and that could be as simple as just turning something very, very slightly. The visual impact that can have. I think also how the customer eats it as well is important. So how you lay that out on a plate, you know, do customers eat a little bit of something and then they try it all together? Do they just dive straight in? Of course, that's really subjective, but you have to think about it as well.
Well, I think actually the way you lay a plate out, I actually did a video on this recently, in terms of, so for example, if you have a more condensed layout with not necessarily stacked, but everything kind of pooled in the center, you are encouraging the diner to eat everything at one go, aren't you, really? Whereas if you have it more isolated, so you have a little dot something here, you know, a square of a protein here, and your carb over here, then they are more likely to maybe do it individually. So I think chefs do have that control of how you want the diner to eat it, if you see what I mean. You know, is it all together? Is it more separated? Is it they have the freedom to kind of pick and choose? So I think you guys have quite a lot of control over how that can be done.
Yeah, I suppose we do actually. But I also like the fact that maybe it's different for different people. Like I always remember, I went to a restaurant in Bristol called Casimir, and I think it's still open now. It's just called Casa, I think. But there was one course, and there's no cutlery, and it was a consommé with a poached quail's egg in it. And they don't tell you what you think. They just say, "Here's the next course," and you go, "Oh, what am I? No cutlery." And then you realise after a little while, and it was super amazingly clarified consommé. The egg was perfectly poached. You just use the bowl. You kind of drink it. And I was like, that's so clever, because, you know, it's a most amazing bowl, everything about it, so simple, but beautifully presented. And that's such a unique element to it. You know, I imagine some people asking for a spoon to get the egg, or some people trying to use their old cutlery for it. I think it's good because you can get, different people will approach it different ways, and I think that's a good talking point for restaurants.
Well, and also that just made it very memorable, because I'm sure you've eaten in an awful lot of restaurants, but that's the dish that you remember, and the reason why is because of the way it was presented to you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that sense of intrigue, like, what on earth do I do now?
Yeah.
How do I do this? You know,
I think that's part of our job to a degree. You know, whilst, you know, we're trying to get people to think as well. You know, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel at Damson, certainly not, because how many times can you do that? But certainly if you can leave something in someone's mind, if you can create something memorable, or if you can get them to question things a little bit, that's really, really part of what we do and what we try and do, because that's going to help bring people back. And it also keeps us, it keeps the process, you know, interesting for us as well. We're not doing the same thing day in and day out. We're trying to kind of constantly change things.
Yeah. So how frequently do you change your recipe? Your menu? How often are you sort of in that creation period? Is it is it seasonal? So it might be similar for a few months, or are you changing more? Not weekly, clearly, but
no. I mean, I'd love to do it weekly. I think it becomes chaotic, really, because, you know, there is a process into kind of getting the quality that you want and the standards that you set for yourselves. We try and change every 4 to 6 weeks the menu, which is still a challenge, and it's not the whole menu, it's a certain amount of dishes, and then so by kind of a cycle of a few months, everything's changed a little bit. We're guided by the seasons like any kind of good restaurant should be, I think. And often you might take a protein or an ingredient that is at a good price point for yourself, and you might change the garnish around that and try and keep it relevant because you like the way it cooks. But yeah, it's trying to bring the business into it as well. You know, we are a business at the end of the day. We need to make money, we need to sustain ourselves, but also value needs to be passed on to the people that dine with us. So it is a kind of a, it's a jumble of things that you have to kind of bring together, and creativity kind of at the heart of it, I'd say.
Okay, so I mean, so let's say you're changing seasons and you've got a brilliant new seasonal ingredient. How do you start the creative process of, you got the dreaded blank plate?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say white plate because I've seen yours and they're not white, which is lovely. What's your thought process? So you've got your mise en place. Do you start in the middle immediately? Is that kind of, where you start? Do you think, I've seen this on Instagram, maybe I'm going to try something a little bit off center, a bit less symmetrical, or is it literally, there's a blank plate here, I'm just going to start doing stuff?
I quite like, I mean, honestly, it would depend on the dish. Some dishes that you have an idea about, I know exactly how this is going to look. It's going to go on the plate, and that's how it's going to be, because you might have done a variation of it before and you're kind of building upon that. And so you've got a bit of a framework there. Often times where you're kind of almost going on the fly with dishes, it's really fun because there is I'll say a risk, but there's a nervousness around it because you don't know how it's going to look, and it might not like how you kind of envisioned it at first. But actually, that creative process is wicked, because what you kind of come up with it can be far away from what you thought, and actually it's really, really good. There's so many factors that go into kind of plating a dish which are important, but I think it's just not trying to overthink it. Less is more. I think you want to get certain things from a flavour perspective, but then from a visual perspective, you also want a bit of height. You want colour on there. And you want it to kind of feel like a dish. I know it might sound it doesn't have much to it, but I think you can look at a plate of food and go, that doesn't seem quite finished there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why the visual side, to give it consideration, is important, because you're right. Chefs immediately go to taste. I mean, of course they do. But I think that can be let down if the visual side isn't as thought through as the cooking, because you're absolutely right. There can be that little element that maybe is missing. Maybe it just needs that final bit of green on the top to complement the red, or the composition hasn't quite worked for whatever reason. It isn't balanced, or it's whatever it might be. Just that little bit. But maybe that's where the evolution comes through.
I think so.
When you start something, it's not the end product. So that's where, if there is that freedom to change something, that's really important.
It is really important, I think you're right. But also, I think that it's a kind of, you've almost hit the nail on the head with that. There's a crux point where you kind of look at a dish and you'll go, it needs something, I don't quite know what. And so then you'll start adding things to it that aren't quite necessary, or the one thing that we've stopped doing a lot of is using microherbs. A microherb is almost like a chef's emergency. I'll go to pull out a microherb, a bit of red vein sorrel, a bit of that. Yes, they do add value to dishes. I'm not going to lie, they will. But I think we overuse them as chefs, and I think that they lose their kind of meaning. You can put a red vein sauerkraut on something, and it gives it height and a bit of colour there. It doesn't actually do anything for the dish. And then you're going, right, safe, I've put my crust on, it's all good now. It's not, I think actually just using a herb, a nice dill sprig or a nice chervil sprig, actually gives it more than say a microherb. They're also bloody expensive for what they are, and more often than not, you don't use the whole thing, so you're wasting that produce. But I think that's one thing that I try and steer away from.
I think that's definitely one of those, from doing this podcast for over a year or so now, that's definitely one of the things, microherbs, red vein sorrel seems to be the poster boy, bad boy for what's kind of one of those fads that's going out. You can tell it's kind of, reaching its peak and it's on the way down, and so many people are saying now, I'm not adding that specifically, and I will be more creative. I will limit myself, because a lot of creativity comes through the limits that you place on yourself.
100%.
By saying I'm not doing this, I'm going to use those creative juices to find another way to bring that little bit of green in, or whatever it might be. And I think that's really important, and that's where you're more at the cutting edge, and that's where you differentiate yourself.
But it is terrifying. I think that's the thing that we get scared of as chefs, because we're going, less is more, and then you go, is it? Can I just put 3 things on a plate and it work? Well, you have to have the balls to kind of to do that. Yeah, confidence. And
absolutely.
That is something which is really difficult. I think that's a peaks and troughs thing with chefs. I think it goes up and down, and I think you have to really, when you've got it, you have to keep that momentum going with it. And it can be, it's super challenging. One of the main demands we've got in this industry, I think.
Yeah, just add it to the list.
Yeah, add it to the list. Yeah.
I'm intrigued. So, did you have? Were you professionally trained? So you went to college or something? Did you?
So I started work at a pub. I was pot washing, and just as a weekend job. I left school at 15. It wasn't for me, and one of the chefs didn't show up one night, and doing like salads and basic kind of things. And I was asked to step in. Stepped in. I managed to kind of get a flow of it pretty quickly, and from there it escalated. I did an apprenticeship through the local college, which was great. I think that nowadays it should be more geared to actually what restaurants are like. It teaches you how to truss a chicken, but doesn't teach you how to do a service. It's great for...
Which is very different, isn't it?
Oh, immeasurably, yeah. And then I think I worked at so many different places, a lot of them being kind of pubs and bistros, and then more market restaurants, and then, like I said, kind of Michelin star places, where it is another kind of ball game, really. You really take your skills and refine them to another level.
Because the reason I was asking, because I was just wondering if at a college or an apprenticeship, do they ever talk about how to present stuff? Or is it something you just learn, kind of, you inhale it as you're in a working environment, as opposed to anybody telling you, kind of, this is what you do? Is there any technical...
That's a really good way of putting it. You inhale it, because I think that you do, like, the best work experience. I think the best way of learning in this industry is absorbing it. You can working with other chefs on sections and learning stuff. I'm certainly a very visual learner. I need to see something rather than reading it in a book. Whilst a book is great, you'll go through it and then you'll learn from that. But I think in a lot of, I don't want to say lower quality places, but in pubs and in those kind of places, there's not a lot of care put into those things, because it is about sustenance more than anything. It's about
volume as well.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of get it out, get it out, get it out, and it lacks the reason why we do things, even down to small things like, why do you wrap a muslin around a lemon, for a fish and chips, that's so you're gonna get pips on the fish when you're seasoning it, So I think less is thought about at that level. Certainly when you're at a Michelin star kitchen, you learn a lot more that presentation is super important, and why those things are, from how you plate something clockwise maybe, or how you've done a terrine so that the layers are specifically those sizes all the way throughout, using rulers to portion something, you might think is a bit too much and overkill. There's a reason for it, it's so that it's uniformed, and I don't really think that perfection is I think it's idolized perfection. I don't think you can ever achieve it, but certainly if you're looking towards that, then you've got somewhere to aim for. No one ever teaches you about plating, really. You just pick it up as you go along, and then I think it's a real cathartic process, because then you learn your own style of plating, and I'm going to do it like this. Chefs will dots and swipes and all these kind of things. Like, you'll find your own one that you like, or you might, try one for a while and then you'll change it. Or quenelle is one, but we've done too much here, I think, actually. There's a tendency to lean on what you know and what's quick, easy and simple. Because also, the one thing I guess we haven't really talked about is, it's all well and good you plate something. How do we do that for a service, and how do we replicate that multiple times in a busy period when you also got 15 other things going on? Like, that has to be taken into consideration. And often isn't, so that's where you put yourself
under pressure.
Yes, I was going to use another word. You've gone very PG.
This is YouTube, you can't.
You've gone very PG with it. But yeah, you do put yourself under pressure unnecessarily so because of that. So again, that comes back to the compromise of things.
Because I'm not a professional chef, clearly. I was speaking with Stephen Edwards, who's got a restaurant down in Brighton, and he was explaining to me about this concept of hits to the plate.
Okay, yeah.
So when it comes, so it's purely presentational wise, like how many things you have to add in what order and stuff like that. And I thought that was a very interesting way to try and describe to people who aren't maybe as knowledgeable about this, about how you can overcomplicate it, because you might have something that looks beautiful, but in a 3-star restaurant, you might have 4 chefs doing the hits to the plate, so you can get through more. And I think Stephen was saying he does a maximum of like 5 or something in his restaurant of things, so they can get it out in a timely and orderly manner. Because one of the questions I get asked so much on this channel is from home chefs, like, how do you keep stuff to temperature? How do you keep stuff warm? And it's probably by, one, having everything ready, mise en place, and then not trying to overdo it, not having too many hits to the plate.
Yeah. Each kitchen is different because of the amount of chefs in the organisation they have. Here we only have one chef plating a dish at one time. If we're doing 8 plates at a time, there'll often be 2, because especially from a main course or a hot side of things, you don't want the food to go cold. There's also a misconception, I think, that food should come out to you piping hot. It's not going to be boiling hot. It can't be, for a number of reasons. It's going to ruin your palate. It's going to take us a minute to plate it up. But it's just down to organisation, and you find the flow of different dishes. Different dishes require you to set up in different ways, and how you kind of garnish things. I think hits to the plate is a really good way of putting it. less is, I don't want to bang on about it, but less is definitely more with that as well. I think maybe on pastry side of things, there's a tendency to be a bit more, you can add a few more garnishes, you can be a bit more heavy with things on there because you've got a bit more time. I think pastry is more
forgiving, I guess.
It is, yeah. And I think, again, with the setup of how you work as well, generally pastry is the last thing you're going to have. The dessert is the last thing you're going to have. I think you've got a bit more time to add those little bits of finesse to things, which maybe a starter or main course doesn't need. Having the system that we work it here, you've got one person giving you all of your garnish, your sauces, your proteins, and then that other person is essentially plating it. If it's done in the right order, your garnishes go down, you dress those, your protein and the sauce is the last thing that come up. All your cooking time's geared around those proteins. If it's 8 minutes to cook that protein or it's resting for 8 minutes, then I've got 8 minutes to get that on a plate. So I'm not going to do it straight away. I'm going to wait for another 4 or 5 minutes and then start getting that ready. In the meantime, I'm getting all of my kind of maybe cold garnishes, the herbs, the pickled things ready. So yeah, it's a great process though. It really, really is. You can have a lot of fun with it as well.
Yeah. I think that must probably is the difference from somebody who is a home chef. It's probably that organisation and pre-planning and all that kind of stuff, which we read our recipes, we understand our recipes, but then that's where it stops. It's especially if you're doing it for more than a few people, that's where it can all fall down, and you probably don't have the right space. Another thing I came across was the plant point, as in how you literally have your plates around you when you're doing it. You have your mise en place, so you can literally reach everything in one thing, which it's probably something you do and have always done, but as a home chef, home cook, I never knew that. They might be all over the place, and then you're moving from one place to the next, and it's that organisation I think home cooks don't have. They don't know that that's the way that you need to organise things to get it out still warm.
Yeah, and I think it's about playing to your strengths with those things. Not trying to do too many things at once. If again, we've got control of the controllables we've got here, so let's control them rather than let it run away with us. If we're trying to do 8 plates of food and it's not going to go well, we're going to stick to 4. Those people might wait longer, but not only because we have an open kitchen, they can see that. That's really, really important, especially running a pass or plating food. It's kind of like you're working, but you're not really thinking about it. When you've done it for a long time, you don't need to kind of think about it. I know exactly where the puree is going. I know that goes there, and then I'm going to dress that, and then I know the protein goes there, and you just kind of doing it. It's muscle memory almost. After a degree of time, and you're kind of swapping things out. The most difficult thing is when you have a menu change. We're actually doing one this week and I'm terrified because the first service of a menu change is always really difficult because you can plan and plan and plan, but when you've got so many things on at once and it's all new and you're trying to make it look as aesthetically pleasing, it is I'm trying not to swear because my wife will kill me. But no, it is really difficult. But again, that's part of the fun you've got to have with it. You've got to kind of turn that fear almost into energy and adrenaline to make it work for you.
Why do you think it's important that people should care about the visual side of food? What their food looks like, either as a professional or as a home cook? Because I've spoken to a number of chefs, or the comments you get in YouTube saying it's all about taste.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on sort of why it's important to care about the visuals?
Well, I think from a professional perspective, there's a few things to consider, but it's expensive. Food's expensive now. If you're going to go to all the effort to prepare something, put time and effort into that organisation, the mise en place of that, and then you're going to be careless with the finished product, you're not sticking true to the ethos of what you've done all the way through. And I think you've got a duty to, really. I mean, having kind of, without sounding soppy in a way, but it's kind of care for it, that ingredient. Why wouldn't you take that extra time and effort to make sure everything is aesthetically pleasing? I mean, there's the old cliche, people eat with your eyes first. It is a cliche. I think it's a cliche for a reason, though. People do visually want to look at a plate of food and go, wow. If people are spending good money, you want to give them something, first of all, that they can't replicate at home, or at least they're trying to figure out how do they do that, or why have they done that, and then suddenly as you're eating it, it might be as simple as something, a nice bit of chicory, which is giving it some height, for example. It elevates it from being something, okay, wow, there's been some thought behind that. I think, if you're charging people good money, you've got to give them the full experience, and that visual of the food is super, super important.
For me, and this is not I'm not biased because I'm a food photographer, but it's that when that plate of food first gets put down in front of me, and you get that wow moment before
Yeah.
you've even tucked into it. That's what I love. Is that, oh, look at that! It's that food envy. It's that, oh, yours looks amazing. You know, that is that kind of the first impression you get as a diner with whoever you're eating with. It's like, oh, yours looks amazing. Oh, I wish I had that, or whatever. But it's that sense of occasion, that theatre, that drama, which I think is really important. I think it's a shame to miss out on that.
It's really interesting you mentioned that though, because I think that you're right. That's the first thing you get, and then often it's like smell. What can I smell? What's going on here? And people will. What I've heard from a lot of people is, oh, but then you eat it and it's ruined anyway. Yeah, and I understand that. You are going to eat. The whole point of you coming is to eat. It is sustenance, yes, but you can still appreciate that for what it is. And people will take, more than ever, people are taking pictures, which is great because you want them to remember what you're doing. But I think it's where the presentation of food can get overlooked very, very quickly from a consumer perspective, because it's like, take a picture, it looks brilliant, now I'm going to eat, and it's forgotten about. And it's actually, as you're eating it, going, okay, that's why that was, why they've done that there, and specifically colours as well, trying to make it vibrant. It often gets lost, and I think it's a real shame because like I said, there is no point in putting the time and effort into something for it to not come across in a certain way, so it is appreciated, if that makes sense. You don't want a customer to get a plate of food and not appreciate it. If you present it in a way, they are going to appreciate it because they can see. We could both do a dish now, and I'm sure yours would be much better than you think it would be. But you're going to see the effort you've put into that. I think that's really, really important.
I think it shows story as well. If you're trying to, sustainability in your restaurant and seasonality, if you're not disrespecting the ingredient by, because you'll cook it very well, but then if you just like slap it on the plate, it's that final yard that is then missed. If you see what I mean, it's kind of an opportunity that you've left on the table to really impress your diner even more. And especially at a price point that's higher, but even at a lower price point, it's just a shame to miss out on something that is so important to a diner's first impression. It just strikes me as a bit of a shame sometimes that it's not higher up the list of priorities sometimes.
Professional pride as well. Like if you're gonna, we work long hours. We're here often missing special occasions. I've got kids. I miss a lot of bedtimes and stuff like that. And what's the point then in being here and not kind of putting your full into it? Of course, you'll have moments where you question yourself, but that's the moments where you actually turn that around and go, no, actually, I am going to, make sure I make sure this plate of food looks brilliant and fantastic. And of course, taste is important. Like you said, I think we're driven by taste because at the end of the day, it has to taste good as well as it looks good. However, I think that visual impact, we have a picnic course on our tasting menu. And it's 4 or 5 things that we've created from wastage that we've got throughout the restaurant. So it's, it's super visual. We pour a broth at the table that you drink. It kind of comes all in these little sections. It's a bit of a wow factor. I mean, you want people to go, bloody hell, that's amazing. And it's well thought out, and there's loads of elements to it. It's not just one thing. So you can have real fun with it as well. I think that's not something that people may miss out on or not see.
I think those things like table pours are really important as well, to be honest with you. Yes. And I really like that, because then you've got the theatre of, is it one of the chefs coming over and doing it, or is it the front of house coming over and pouring it for you, and they'll probably tell you a little bit about the dish as well, and it just adds a bit more interest. I think because I'm sure you could do that before it comes to the
of course you could,
right? But I think it shows that sort of care, that interest of the diner and doing it for them. I think it's a nice touch.
It's such a small thing. I think that one of the things that I really am hot on, that might not be the right phrase, is like little details and pouring a sauce at a table to engage with the customer a bit more, to kind of show them why you've done something. That 30 seconds or so, and it could be longer than that, it could be shorter than that, is really important, because you're helping bring that visual to life a bit more, and why you've created that dish, why you're using the ingredients you're using, and why you're pouring the sauce exactly in the middle there rather than around the outside or something.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically, it's not a topic I've really asked much of the chefs on this podcast, is specifically about the plate.
Yeah.
So you're clearly a newish restaurant, so I assume you went through the process of selecting plates fairly recently. What was it you were looking for in terms of shape, colour, function, things like that? Did you get a wide variety, or did you, because of budget, have to keep it fairly constrained? What were your thought processes about how you would, or what do you look for in a...
I love crockery. I absolutely love crockery. I have to be very careful about how much we buy. I think just something different, like I think there's definitely a place for a plain white plate. I don't think there's anything bad with that at all. But I think, especially with a tasting menu, which we offer here, having a different plate for each course, not only does it give us kind of clear direction of, right, that's the next course, that's what is going on. You know, a black plate, for example, with a slightly different shape, it gets people thinking. And it means you have to be a bit more creative with your plating as well. It helps colours bounce off of it. You know, well, we've done a carrot dish before on a black plate. The orange, you know, so dynamic off the black, and it's really, really cool. Again, straight away, you've kind of got someone a little bit, rather than it being like, okay, it's wow, okay.
Yeah.
I like things which are handmade as well. I think there's a real kind of sense of thought, I don't know, feel behind them as well, you know.
You can tell.
Yeah, you can tell.
You can absolutely tell, and I think it shows, again, more care. It's more artisan, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's more, again, it's more story.
Yeah.
It's more story. It might be one of those things the diner doesn't know why it looks better,
Yeah.
but there's something about a handmade or hand-thrown plate that can make all the difference.
And I'd love to like get local handmade stuff if I could. I mean, it's just super expensive. I went on a big kind of, before this restaurant opened, I went on a big crockery hunt. We went to one place specifically, and I picked out maybe 100 things and had to scale it down. But even down to like jugs that you pour sauce in, like it's got to kind of match, and just, you know, if it is white, let's have some detail in there. And you know, crockery is important. I think that either you're a restaurant that wants to stick with white and kind of plain stuff and have a kind of few bits here and there of more kind of flared crockery, as it were, or kind of like us, which is, you know, we've got different colours for every kind of course, and if it is plain, it's more of an off-white, or it has a little bit of a detail to it, or it's not quite perfectly round. You know, there's something going to it. I think sometimes, like I said, it helps you with the crafting of a dish. We've got an oval black plate, and you have to kind of do it down the centre. So you have to really think about your plating with it. Then it's kind of helping you kind of be a bit more creative.
Again, I guess it's placing those restrictions on you,
Yeah.
isn't it? By having a black plate, because it is a brave choice. But then you're right, you get some easy wins. If you can put the orange on there or something like that, then immediately it elevates it from if you'd put it on an off-white plate or something, doesn't it really? You immediately have that contrast, you know, which is a quick and easy win, but you need to know how to use it and where to use it. And
absolutely, yeah.
like
Again, that balance is really, really key. I think also it could be looked at as if, you know, you're just trying to do too much with the crockery as well. But actually, it's part of the care to what we're doing. It's part of the experience. You know, we've spent a small fortune on crockery and cutlery and glassware. Why? Because it's part of the experience, and it needs to tie in visually with not just the food, but the whole thing that we're offering here. If you just had cheap crockery and cutlery, yeah, you could put some lovely food on it. But you're elevating that experience just a little bit more.
Well, it's another one of those visual things. I mean, it's so fundamental because it's the foundation of what you're putting everything else on.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
You know, I mean,
exactly.
it really is the bedrock of where you're starting from. And if it gives you ideas or it gives you a way to go, then that strikes me as again quite a good thing that should have a thought process before you sort of start. I mean, again, not everyone can have budget, and you know, again, for home cooks and stuff, we'll pretty much work off what we have, and white is clearly the best for most things. So again, it's bang for buck.
Yeah,
absolutely. When you have the choice, and clearly you can tell as soon as you mentioned that, you can see the light in your eyes come in. It's one of those things that a lot of chefs who I've spoken to, when they've certainly opened their restaurant for the first time, it's the thing they cannot wait to get in and go and see.
It's a strange thing. I mean, it's like going to Nisbets. Like it's like a chef. It's like a kid at Christmas. Like, again, also you do have the problem of you've got a dish idea and you've got all these plates, and you're like, I just don't know which plate it's going to go with. Like, it doesn't look quite right on the green or the white, or so it can be difficult as well. You kind of create a rod for your own back in some aspects. But you know, I actually really love the making of crockery and stuff as well. Like, I think that it's a super cathartic thing to do, but also it's really, I don't know, something really down to earth about it. That if you can, what I'd really love to do, I don't know if you know Silo, the restaurant in London. So they are massive about, they're a no waste restaurant, and they take like shells and broken crockery and they kind of grind it down and they make their own crockery out of it. And it's an unbelievable thing to do. The concept, like we've got all these scallop shells, and I want to grind them down and make some like crockery out of it, because I think it could be an amazing. It's also, just caveat this, super expensive to do. I don't know how it's done, but I think those things can be really, again, you're being creative and the visual that it can bring you. Even use serving stuff inside of shells and things like that. I know a lot of chefs do it as well, but you're kind of using nature for what it is and not manipulating it too much. So yeah.
And again, that again just tells the story of what you're doing here. It just
Yeah.
fits in so nicely. Again, cost aside,
Yeah.
cost aside would be an amazing thing to do, because again, when the diner says, "Oh, this is a lovely plate," you can tell that entire
Yeah.
story and give the narrative of why you're doing it, how you did it. It's local. Again, it just all fits in with the story of what you're doing as a restaurant, which I think is fascinating, really.
I think, like I said, if you're going to do it, you may as well, do it to the best of your ability. I think anyone watching this, if they're chefs or if they have any idea of the restaurant industry, it is not easy to run a restaurant, to have a restaurant, especially a new one. So you are risking a lot. But if you don't risk stuff, I think you're not going to get the reward out of it at the end of the day. So yeah.
With the plate as well, going back to the plate.
Yeah.
Sort of the scale in terms of, do you have any rules about, if you have a larger plate, you're then putting something smaller in it to really emphasize the negative space, to really focus the eye? Do you have any rules of symmetry or anything like that? Is there anything in terms of the plate, how you choose which size you're going to use or which shape or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think using natural contours of a plate is really simple, like how you will garnish around a plate. You're gonna, if it's a circular plate, we don't use any squares or anything like that here. We've got an oval, but you're gonna, more often than not, you'll kind of maybe work clockwise, or you'll do a ring of something, or you'll follow the natural contour of the plate because it fits, to my eye anyway, it fits in with the plate. It doesn't look disjointed. And there's a flow to it. But, like I said, it needs to look like a complete dish. Negative space on a plate, I think, is okay, but it has to fit in with the dish. I think everything is dish specific. But also, I think one of the most amazing things about this is that, I'm telling you this from my point of view, and you might agree or disagree. It's so subjective, this, which is what I love about it. I think there's often a negative thing about that. Why is it negative?
I think it's one of those things that's difficult for people who are trying to get into it, because it's not a clean answer, is it? People want the answer to A is B, the answer to C is D. But there isn't, you're right. It's the same with any art form. It is subjective. What I like, you don't like. What you like, I don't like. Whatever.
And you did a video about the rule of three. Is that right?
I have done one on composition, yeah.
And like that's often an odd number. We always use it is 3. Now I don't know why I use 3. I just know I use 3 things. It's one of these. It just visually looks better. 4 is often too cramped, even with a lot of negative space. But it's so subjective. I also think that using the ingredients that you're using that in its natural form. For example, at the moment we've got a pumpkin dish on. And we take these pumpkin fondants, but we've just carved them out of the pumpkin. So naturally, it's got this arc shape to it. Well, we'll use that. I want to use that in the plating bit, build around it, build on top of it, build inside it, rather than trying to dot around it. We use that. I think, again, that's really important to be able to try and utilise as well. The shape of the ingredient can help with the plating of it, and if you can tie that into the plate as well, I think that's a win-win for me.
How do you get your inspiration? Again, not cooking-wise, but visually. Are you somebody that studies? I noticed you've got an awful lot of cookbooks up here. I assume, like the rest of us, we're on Instagram. What do you do to get new ideas? How do you go about doing that?
I think that it can come from anywhere and anything. Cookbooks and Instagram and looking at other people to give you inspiration is definitely an obvious one. I think everyone does it, especially with Instagram, because it's so kind of there. Literally, I could pick up my phone now and I could get inspiration there and then. I think leaning back on meals you've had and experiences you've had which have been really good, and then you going, okay, I really like that idea, how can I make it my own? Speaking with my team is another one as well, because there's, I don't have the same idea as that person, and that person has a different idea to me, and we can kind of collaborate on that. And that's such a beautiful process, because you're taking something and might not end up how you want it to be, but actually, if you consider all the elements to it, it's actually a better idea than when you started. But there's inspiration comes from everything, and from the time of year, from the colours you're seeing outside, of course, the ingredients that are available from a seasonality perspective. It could be something I've worked with further chefs who've gone, I was driving in this morning, and I saw all these red cars, and I just thought I was thinking of strawberries. That could be inspiration. I mean, it's daft, but I think that not shutting yourself off from any kind of source of that. I mean, we're creative people. It's a creative process all the time, so you get it from everywhere.
Having influences from all over the place will make you a stronger whatever you are. I get inspiration from photography from all over the place as well. Little ideas that you pick from here, pick from there. I think people are very concerned about copying, and I think that's something they need to be but you don't copy something verbatim. You take little bits from different places and then add your own spin to it, and that's where you can generate a style. And I think that's true of everybody.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about this, about music as well. How many chords are there? There's only a certain amount of chords. How many ingredients are there? How many people put broccoli and blue cheese together, right? Yeah, it's a classical flavour pairing, or beef and onion. There are so many. You can't reinvent the wheel, but putting your spin on it is super important, and that can come down to the plating, from the preparation. I think that it's important that we use other chefs and people in the industry as inspiration, because at the end of the day, that's part of what it's all there for. Social media, especially, because it's there. That's why you're using it. Chefs aren't following other chefs to keep an eye on them. I think it is inspiration. Everyone learns from somewhere.
This is it.
Are we all learning from Escoffier at the end of the day? Yeah, to a degree. But then Paul Foster learned from Sat Baines, and then Laura Kimber will learn from Paul Foster. All these kind of things. To pick an example out of the hat there, just only because we were talking about Paul Foster earlier.
I think it should also be flattering as well, surely.
It should be.
If somebody has taken a style that I have taken from somewhere else, thought, oh, that's amazing, and then have built on that to create something even more amazing, what's the downside of that?
I think I don't want to upset any chefs here, but I think we're very ego-driven. We can be very ego-driven, and it is very difficult to put your ego aside when you are putting yourself on a plate. And you can take a recipe, an idea from someone else and change it. If it doesn't live up to that idea, then suddenly you're in a spot where you've gone, it's not worked, the process hasn't worked there. Whereas actually, completely subjective. Who cares? Like, really? Because no one can copyright, steak and ale pie, can they? You can't. So why bother?
Well, this is it. And that person didn't invent stale egg pie the first time.
Who invented a chip? Like what the bloody hell? Like, it doesn't. I think that's where ego comes into it, and I think there should be room for us to celebrate everyone doing everything in the right way, in their own way. Sorry, and there is all room for that. And why can't we? If you want to put a dot of purees 3 ways, that's your preference. Have at it. Like, good for you. It's not how I do it, but I'm certainly not gonna actively slander it.
Yeah, I think there's a transparency as well. There's an honesty to the person that has maybe borrowed an idea or pinched that idea to say, I got this from such and such. I think that is absolutely reasonable. But to say that I'm the one that invented this and nobody else can possibly use this is a little bit redundant, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that no chefs are doing that these days, because realistically, I think that kind of ends. I mean, it's not a route you want to go down.
Yeah. So speaking of other chefs, which ones sort of, again, visually, which ones do you think, if you're looking for inspiration, who do you go to first?
I think it's changed so much over the years. At the moment, I'm Adam Byatt at Trinity. The ethos of not overdoing it, but everything that is done on that plate, which is super simple, has a purpose, and it looks clean and beautiful. And when you see a plate of food over social media, over a picture, over a video that is going to taste good, I can almost taste it before I eat. I've eaten it. I think that's him at the moment is one for me.
Just sorry to interrupt you there, because I had a little look, because I know who Adam is, as in I've seen some of his stuff before, but I took a few pictures off the internet.
Yeah.
What sort of stuck out at me straight away was his interesting use of shapes.
Yeah.
This dish here specifically, I think it's a terrine, something like that, but the use of the leek around the side, that dish there, I'll show the pictures on the video.
Yeah.
It creates an awful lot of tension. It's clearly intentionally done like that.
Yeah.
But the weird angles it comes out, there's not a lot of symmetry in that at all.
No.
Intentionally done. It's really strong. I really, really like that.
But actually,
it kind of pushes boundaries.
Yeah, but
it's not
also,
what you expect to see.
What he's doing there is really clever, because he's using the natural shape of that ingredient, right? Yes. And again, it's a plain white plate because he wants it all to kind of sing. And I'm imagining when you put the sauce on, it's going to really bring out everything as well. The terrine, again, as you go up, like the leeks are in a certain shape. You're just using that ingredient, it's all so clean and it looks beautiful. And I love this mold and the mince pie there. Like, there's 3 things on that plate. It looks stunning though, like so beautiful, and
the precision in this is different to the precision in this. There's not precision in that, but I'd suggest that's a different level.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rocher now after seeing that later on for the demo, but
this is the one for my eye really sticks out to me, because you don't see plates of food like that very often. That is a very contrarian, I would suggest, way of doing it, which has its own interest. To the eye.
But also, I think what's important to note is that these are all from the same restaurant.
Yes.
And so you can have kind of contrasting styles. And I think that maybe if that's down to maybe him and his chefs who have different ideas, but I think that you don't have to have the same stylistic method for your starter, main course, dessert, or especially with the tasting menu. There's freedom to roam there. I think visually you have to kind of know it comes from somewhere. I think that's where the flavour comes into it, though. You can taste a chef cooking their food. But, it's, like I said, like you were saying, I think it's interesting the ones that jump out to you, the ones that jump out to me, because of, from where I want Damson to be, it's more, again, I'm not going to copy what Adam does, but definitely that's the route I want to go down, like clean and effective, and everything is thought of.
Because I imagine a chef's eye is you almost look at technique straight away. It's like how it's like people who try and reverse engineer a magic trick. Like how did they do that? But for me, no, my eye specifically goes, especially since doing this channel, goes to what it looks like. Why might they have done that? And that's why what was it? The bottom dish of the chicken and guinea hen just stuck out to me immediately because it's a very brave choice. I would suggest, because it doesn't look like most plates of food would look like, with the odd angles and the things sticking out at angles.
Would you say that's less aesthetically pleasing to a lot of people?
I would say it is. I would say it creates more. It's more of a tension. It's less pleasing to look at.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really brave choice.
Yeah.
Because again, it's intentional. When you're at that level, everything you put on the plate is clearly intentional, isn't it? Really. So you've done that on purpose to kind of push a button or something, maybe. Yeah. It's like the Massimo Bottura, the splats and stuff like that. Which when I first started this channel, I thought that's rubbish. But then understanding more about the story and why, and his influence and stuff like that, and how it was so different. Yeah, it's really brave, and I've completely 180'd my opinion on it now. Even though I guess that's a relatively old techniques and stuff to do now. Yeah, when it was new, it was kind of like, I imagine, quite shocking to the food world to see food presented like that. Yeah. And there aren't many chefs, I would suggest, that have that plate recognition of that's his, right? I mean, that is really brave, like the lemon tart that was dropped on the floor and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. To have the bravery, but also to have the eye to think that's really good. Yeah. That looks amazing, right? Yeah. So few people would have done that, and that's where you're pushing boundaries. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like good comedy. Good comedy should create intrigue, should push buttons, should make you think. And I think that is a little bit of that. That's why that one sticks out to me more than technique or flavour or anything like that. Yeah. I'm sure it has all of that. Oh yeah, but it's fascinating. Yeah. It is really interesting. I love how subjective it is and how people come up with different ways of things. I think this one of the most amazing things about this industry that is kind of not thought about enough, or we often look at the negative concepts of this industry of cooking, of restaurants, of pub, of all of it, hospitality, whereas we should always try and focus on the positives, right? And there are so many. Oh goodness, yeah. So from your career, what has been your favourite plate to present, do you think? I'd say my next plate. I know that sounds really... that's a good answer. I'd say, I know that sounds a bit contrived maybe, or maybe well thought out, but I promise you I did not think that out. Yeah. Because you're changing so often, and because you're always trying to better yourself, in whatever aspect that is, I think that for me is genuinely the most honest answer I could give, because I want our food to evolve, because I want to keep evolving and bettering myself. I think that then there's been certain dishes you do over time which stick with you, that you've done, that visually look good and you're very, very happy with, and you'll take and maybe replicate them and not change too much with those, because you bring dishes back seasonality wise and stuff, or you become renowned for. But so let's say you have that dish, I'm sure you do. Would you then try and mix up the plating more, or do you kind of, because it is popular, you'll kind of do it the same as it was, or would you try and mix it up? And I'd always try and mix it up, I think, because you're trying to evolve that. But also, if you're renowned for a dish, and not that I necessarily feel like I am renowned for a dish necessarily, but if someone's had something before and then they sit on the menu and they order it and they sit exactly, there's a nostalgia there to that, which I think we should play on more and more. Nostalgia's so powerful. And that comes from the visual, from the smell, from the taste, from everything you do. I almost wouldn't want to bastardize it too much, because you want it to. That's what I'm having. That's what I remember from before, and you know what? It is better than before. Yeah. What about if you're sort of taking a classic? We just saw that Adam Byatt mince pie dish. Yeah. Do you do much of that, and then completely change how flip the perspective and what that would then have on the plating? Particularly, is that something you've done much of? Yeah, I mean, you try to all the time, but also within that, I think it's about the balance of that. You go too far one end, if you could deconstruct a mince pie. It's not a mince pie. And what do people really expect? What do our consumers expect? At the end of the day, we want to
push ourselves, we want to be creative and stuff like that. We're also commercial. We have to be because we're a business. So if you do something too far one way, you've suddenly gone away from what the emphasis should be on, I think.
So that was actually a very good answer, I have to say. Well, it was a really good answer. I mean that. That was a great answer. I'm not going to let you get away with such an easy one this time, though. But what's the most challenging dish you've ever plated and why?
Challenging dish I've ever plated and why?
I can tell why that looks.
Yeah, I thought. Do you know what? This is a. I thought about this and I really struggled. But there's a pork dish that I did at a restaurant once, and
was it your dish or was this?
It wasn't my dish. Okay. No. And I was on sauce, so I was controlling all the protein and all the actual sauce for the dish as well. Often, to be honest with you get involved with everything because there was about 15 elements to this dish, and it was the whole. The idea of the dish was amazing. You know, you've got a pork loin, you've got a confit cheek. There's a black pudding element in there as well. You've got crackling. You've got.
I'm on board already.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. There was rhubarb on there. There was so many amazing things, but there's 15 things on a plate that you've got to bring up warm, cooked perfectly. It was too much, and so you would often scramble to get it on the plate. It didn't look as aesthetically good. You'd miss something. It would have to come back. Then you've got to redress it before you know that's already sent you in the shit.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, that's where I definitely had an appreciation for less is more because you're going down all the time on something like
drowning.
Yeah, like is it necessary? Don't get me wrong. The idea of taking a whole pig and breaking it down, and having an element on a plate is amazing. But if you can do it in an orderly fashion, when there was 6 different pork elements on there, that is mega, as well as the garnishes and the sauce and stuff. Like also from a prep perspective, it's a mission to do. You're defeated almost before you've begun.
Would you say there's almost a vanity metric to that in terms of just trying to show every single skill that you have on one plate? Is there, because that's a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got 15 different things.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that was probably a while ago, so that trend has probably changed quite a lot now. So it's probably over time, because all these things are peaks and troughs and the styles come and go. And now with New Nordic, it's a lot more simple. It's a lot more ingredient led and stuff like that. And that's not to disrespect anybody who did it, because that's the thing. But it probably creeps in because you mentioned about ego in chefs.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly when you were just talking there. So what I was thinking, I think that it's more of a way of a chef to show off, I think sometimes, which I'm not a massive fan of. I think that humility is kind of everything you should kind of aspire to have from the preparation of the produce to the way you serve it to the flavour and the taste. There's definitely, and it also depends on how many chefs you've got, how your setup is, what you're actually able to do physically, because you can push yourself and get something out there. Or if you've got 15 chefs, you could put that's one element per person for that dish. It makes it sound a lot easier than actually one person or 2 people doing that.
Yeah, if you're in a 3-star kitchen with chefs coming out your ears.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at something like the Ledbury, the most amazing looking food, there is a lot going on the plates. I often am bewildered by I see their Instagram and I see the bio and what's actually there. It's fascinating that people would even be able to think of putting that many things on the plate. I'm sure it's phenomenal, and I'm not taking anything away from that. But us here, we can't do that. There's no point us trying to replicate that. So, yeah.
Interesting. Can you give me just a rough outline of the dishes that you're going to plate for us today?
Yeah.
So what are we starting with?
So first of all, we're going to do a confit trout dish. So we have local Berkshire trout that we have confit in a bit of charcoal oil. We've just sous vide it, so it's just cooked, and then we are going to take it out, just give it a blowtorch to give it a really nice colour. We're serving that with kind of like a take on a warm tartar sauce. So we've made a beautiful fish stock that we've let down with some cream and some aromats. We've got shallots, capers and gherkins in there. We've got some of the trout roe. We've got confit celeriac in there and just some fresh apple, just to really give it some vibrancy. We're finishing it off kind of with a lemon gel. So we take all of the waste lemons from our bar. We make a preserved lemon gel out of it. It's super bitter, but it kind of is a real nice contrast on the dish of everything there. And then just some dill sprigs just to finish it off. Again, we want some colour there. We want a bit of height as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And in terms of the plating then, what were your thoughts for this dish? And has it evolved over time? Is this something that has been on the menu a while, or is it something that is, if I came in a week or two, it probably would look different?
No, I mean, this has been on for a few weeks. And again, it's actually one of the things, I mean, I saw Adam Byatt do something quite similar. I think they hot smoke salmon, and they serve it with pickled cucumber and stuff, and it's just like super simple, but like decadent. I was like, okay, how can we replicate that? In the restaurant, how can we do our kind of spin on it? And we've got the most amazing local trout. I was like, right, that's a no-brainer. And then, you know, how can we bring the elements into it? Tartar sauce is like nostalgic in itself. And so bringing a warm element to it, which it's been done before, but just getting the balance of all those things, and then the different shapes, different colours in there. So yeah, that's it. It really is quite a simple dish, but actually there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. I quite like that about it.
And then the plate that you're going to serve it on, was that an easy choice? Because clearly you've got quite a few.
No, it wasn't. I tried it on a few different plates. This is the one that we're serving on is an off-white, but there's a bit of texture to it, so it's not just a boring white plate. You know, it's been handmade in I think it's in Portugal. It's got a bit of a rustic rim to it, and it's like speckled, so there's something to it. There's a bit of depth and texture there.
But then, do we see quite a lot of the orangey pink of the trout? So it like pops off that quite nicely.
Well,
so it's quite a lot of contrast.
Yeah, there's a bit there, especially with the lemon gel as well and all those colours. Yeah, you want it to kind of pop a bit more. We tried serving it on a green and it just blended in a bit too much. We tried serving it on a black again. It wasn't quite right. So yeah.
That's interesting. So the dish led the plate choice this time, was
it? Rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Interesting. And you're going to kindly do a second one as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to do a dessert actually, which isn't necessarily my wheelhouse, but I just think I really like the way this is plated. Okay. So we're doing a Jerusalem artichoke sponge. So we've taken the idea of a carrot cake and we've made that in with artichoke essentially. Super seasonal. We've made a pear curd, some confit pear which we've just spiced slightly. We've got some artichoke crisps. And we're finishing it with just a buttermilk sorbet that we make from all of the waste buttermilk that we get from our butter here. So yeah.
And what about the plating on this one? What was the thought process? Is it more of an in my head, I haven't seen any of these yet. Is this more of an isolated plating?
This one actually is more of a, you're using the cake as a base to then kind of build off of, and you can really be specific and really purposeful with how you're plating it. You're using the cake as a base and you're building off of that, and it's just neat and aesthetically pleasing, and yeah, I really like it. These two dishes are kind of a real good sum up of where our food has come and where we want to kind of take it as well.
Yeah. So Henry, you're very kindly going to do a roast dish because that's coming up to Christmas, and obviously being British, roast dinners are so important.
Yeah.
But it's one that I do an awful lot, but I just kind of never think about the plating because again, it's that panic, sort everything out.
Yeah.
You know. So it'd be really interesting to see what you do. So what are you going to do for us today in terms of?
So we're going to do, again, a classic of roast chicken. And it's nothing over thought about this. It's just doing everything really, again, with purpose and done well. We've got beautiful roast potatoes. We've got sprouts because they're in season and you're going to see those at Christmas. We've got a beautiful roasted carrot.
Yeah.
We've got stuffing for the chicken. We've got red cabbage. We've got cauliflower cheese. And I think the way that we do a roast here, and I think everyone does it really, is it is quite communal. You'll put it down, you get people to serve it. Often you'll have a little bit on the plate. And I think what I'll do is I'll break it down, but then show you how I would plate it if we were going to plate it as well. I think there's a nice element
that would be amazing. And as it's chicken, would that be fairly transferable to turkey as well?
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you, turkey's not my personal favourite.
No, it's not mine either.
I think it's very traditional, and I think you can do it nicely. I've just had my nan overcooking turkey for years and years, and you've got bad memory. The nostalgic thing, right? You know, I want to stay away from that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would always say with turkey, cook the legs and the crown separately. That's just a me preference. And then there's the classic wrap it in bacon to keep it moist and stuff, butter underneath the skin and all those things. But yeah, I mean, easily transferable.
But in terms of how you would maybe carve and serve and present, pretty similar.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, turkey's generally bigger, and you would carve maybe slices of it, or you take the breast off of the crown and then slice it. I mean, we're going to take the breast and the legs off and serve them kind of separately.
Yep.
But definitely, you definitely slice that up as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see it. Fantastic. Henry, that's brilliant.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you very much.